mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the webcast. My name is Christine Dursey-Davis. I'm the Executive Director of the Ohio chapter of the American Planning Association and Vice Chair of the New Urbanism Division, and I'll be the moderator for today's webcast. Today is Friday, July 10th, and we will hear the presentation, EcoDistricts, Performance-Based Urban Design. For technical help during today's webcast, type your questions in the chat box found in the webcast toolbar to the right of your screen, or call the 1-800 number shown. For content questions related to the presentation, type those in the questions box, also located in the webinar toolbar to the right of your screen. And we will answer those at the end of the presentation during the Q&A. And please identify which presenter your question goes with. On your screen is a list of the sponsoring chapters and divisions. Thanks to all of the participating sponsors for making these webcasts possible and free to members. Today's webcast is sponsored by the Urban Design and Preservation Division. We will hear more about that in a moment. To learn more about APA chapters, visit planning.org/chapters, and to learn more about divisions, planning.org/divisions. Coming up on your screen is a list of our upcoming webcasts. To register for these webcasts, visit ohioplanning.org/planning-webcasts. And to log your CM credits for attending today's webcast, visit planning.org, go to your dashboard, and select Activities by Provider. Again, today's provider is the Urban Design and Preservation Division, and then select today's title. This webcast has been approved for 1.5 CM credits for live viewing only. Some of our recorded webcasts are available for distance education CM credit. For availability of our distance education credits, check our webcast webpage at ohioplanning.org/planning-webcast. And like us on Facebook, Planning Webcast Series, to receive up-to-date information on our sponsored events. We are recording today's webcast, and it will be available on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube, and a PDF of the PowerPoint will be available after the session at ohioplanning.org/planning-webcast. I'm now going to turn it over to Margaret Rifkin of the Urban Design and Preservation Division.
Hi, I'm Margaret Rifkin. As Chris introduced me, we would like to invite you to join the division if you're not already a member. And if you are a member, we'd like to invite you to become more involved. For example, you could help with the webinar series that we produce from the division. You could write for our quarterly newsletter, or you could help out at the national conference, which next year is going to be in Phoenix. So if you're interested, you can use the question box that you see on your screen today, and you can send us a message right now or at any point, and we'll contact you after the webinar. Please also make note that we have another webinar coming up, which wasn't yet on the slide that Chris showed you. It's going to be in November. It's on best practices for producing documents, such as plans, guidelines, and reports. Very practical, very well-tested approaches for managing schedules, workflow, review, the many revisions, and it was developed as an in-house guide for a prominent national firm, and we'll be sharing that at that webinar. I also wanted to make sure you knew about the Plan Edison courses that are available. These complement this webinar series very nicely because they give you a way to stay current in the field on a very broad spectrum of topics and allow you to watch them in increments, anytime, anywhere. So you could watch for 3 minutes on your smartphone while you're waiting online somewhere and then pick it up later. So they cover this broad spectrum of topics. For example, drawing and sketching, also different types of software. I discovered these courses when I needed a good overview and a quick start using some software, and these courses focus on exactly what I needed for urban design and planning, unlike some of the tutorials that go with general software. So the Urban Design and Preservation Division has partnered with Plan Edison to offer a discount in July only to our division members. So take advantage of it, join the division, and sign up and subscribe to these courses if you're interested. With that, I'd like to give you a brief introduction to our first speaker, Otto Condon. He's a principal in the Washington, D.C. office of ZGF Architects and has over 25 years of experience in the field. He's been extensively involved in plans and projects for downtowns, neighborhoods, housing, institutions, and transit. His approach focuses on revitalization, placemaking, environmental stewardship, and implementation, and he's also recently been involved with some work in Tbilisi in the country of Georgia, over near the Black Sea, working on a mixed-use neighborhood with 4,000 houses in that capital city and in the vicinity of that capital city. Originally from Minnesota, Otto has lived and worked across the country, including periods in Boston, Seattle, Portland, Chicago, and obviously Washington, D.C. His commitment to sustainable design goes beyond his work. He's installed solar panels on the roof of his home that work so efficiently they actually put power back onto the grid. Otto received a Bachelor of Environmental Design from the University of Colorado in Boulder and a Master of Architecture and Urban Design from the University of Washington. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Otto.
Thank you, Margaret. Can everyone's, or Christine, is my screen showing, just to check?
You are good to go.
Oh, great. Okay. I want to also thank Margaret for asking for us to organize this panel. When she requested for the division that we develop a panel on eco-districts, we wanted to provide a broad view of how eco-districts have developed, and so I'm pleased to introduce the panel, and we've organized it to talk a little bit about how the eco-district concept has evolved, and also provide a private development perspective, a public agency perspective, and an organizational perspective. Starting off the presentation will be Jill Sherman. She's a partner with Girding Edlin, which is a developer in Portland, Oregon, and they're really leading at the forefront of sustainable development. Jill is focused on public-private partnerships and leads the Girding Edlin efforts for new development, and has a very broad portfolio including student housing, academic buildings, community facilities, and has within the portfolio has 15 LEED certified projects, including 5 platinum projects. She's also a member of the Portland Planning Commission, or she was from 2007 to 2012, and she has a Bachelor of Arts and Bachelor of Science from University of Penn, and Master's in Urban Studies from Portland State University. Following Jill's presentation, Elizabeth Miller and I will talk about the Southwest Ecodistrict in Washington, D.C., and Elizabeth is joining us from D.C. She's a landscape architect and a certified planner. She's the Director of Physical Planning for the National Capital Planning Commission, which is the agency in charge of planning for all the federal properties in the Washington, D.C. area. She has led or managed the planning efforts for the commission, and focusing on protecting and enhancing the public realm within the monumental core of the nation's capital. She previously was a principal planner down in Florida and has also worked in the private sector. She also serves on several planning and design boards, and she has a landscape architecture degree from the University of Florida and a master's in design studies in real estate from Harvard. Finally, our final presenter will be Adam Beck. He's the Director of Innovation with EcoDistricts, and he is joining us from Brisbane, Australia. He was previously living in Portland and has since relocated to Australia. He leads the efforts for EcoDistricts, a nonprofit organization, to help implement sustainability tools, and is guiding the Target Cities program, which he'll talk about. And he also has experience both in the private sector, and before joining EcoDistricts in Portland, he was working with the Green Building Council of Australia, and he developed the Green Star Communities tool. He also has been extensively involved with the World Green Building Council and the Carbon 40 Cities Initiative. So this panel has also been not only organized because of to provide a broad spectrum of eco-districts, but there's also a link going back to Portland, Oregon. And as a member of CGF, we first worked on the Pearl District, which has become pretty well recognized for its creation of livability in a new neighborhood and old rail yards, and has been, since converting from rail yards, developed several thousand units of housing, integrated streetscapes, created excellent public spaces, and incorporated transit to really create a model neighborhood that a lot of cities are looking to. As part of with the success of the River District, it really was, well, first I'll talk about Jill with Gurney Elam. They started to look at, there's a great neighborhood, but how can we move it further in terms of sustainability? The River District also was the model for the mayor of Portland to establish first the EcoDistricts.org, which then became a nonprofit, which Adam is now connected with. And Elizabeth, as part of the National Capital Planning Commission, attended a conference, one of the first summits for EcoDistricts in Portland, where that was one of the generations of the idea to move forward with the concept of an EcoDistrict for the Southwest area in Washington, D.C. Now, what is an EcoDistrict? It's really pretty simple. It's a neighborhood that has multiple options for transportation. It is a neighborhood that is connected with green spaces, and it's very walkable. The first thing you need is to really start off with good tenets of good planning. What moves it into an eco-district is comprehensive strategies for addressing energy and water reduction, and really thinking about how to introduce sustainability beyond a single building. And you start to think about the block and district scales. And eco-districts also need to have a social structure, and so that all the stakeholders come together and first identify the environmental and economic goals, and have a joint approach towards how to actually implement those projects. So with that intro, I would like to turn it over to Jill to talk about the Brewery Blocks.
Thanks, Otto. So as Otto said, I'm with a development company, an investment management company. We're headquartered in Portland, Oregon. We are doing work nationally, including West Coast cities as well as Chicago and Boston, and our focus is really on mixed-use, urban redevelopment, highly sustainable, transit-oriented, and in very walkable neighborhoods. Next. I'm going to specifically talk about, as Otto said, the Brewery Blocks, which is a 5-block redevelopment project in Portland's Pearl District. I'm hoping to see another slide. There it is.
There we go.
So in addition to the brewery blocks, which is what I will focus my discussion on, which is 5 blocks, we do have a number of other projects that we've done in the Pearl District, of which a handful of them are historic renovations, as well as some new condominiums and apartments for, a total of 12 plus projects in that one neighborhood. They're all LEED certified. 4 of them are LEED Platinum. Next. The brewery blocks, I'll just keep talking and we'll hope the slides.
Yeah,
the slides
there's a little trouble
there
here.
They are. Yeah, no problem. Brewery Blocks was, as you can imagine, it was an operating brewery in what had been a former industrial district in the city. When we purchased the property, a lot of the planning for the Pearl District and the redevelopment of the Pearl District into a mixed-use neighborhood, the planning had happened. Some of the projects had started, and the Brewery Blocks was on the south end of that neighborhood. So it wasn't sort of the first step in that redevelopment process, but it was early on. And the brewery decided to stop its functioning in that area, and we purchased what was 5 city blocks. It had a couple hundred jobs. It didn't have any housing, and very, very empty streets around it. Next. When we started working on the brewery blocks, we were not necessarily thinking about an eco-district per se. We certainly, I don't think, had even really heard of the term or were thinking in those terms. This was back in 2000, so 15 years ago now. But we did have some very explicit goals next around sustainability, livability, and community. So, we knew that there were things that we could look at or do a little differently because we had multiple blocks instead of developing on a building-by-building basis. So we set goals around LEED certification, around energy efficiency, water efficiency, and construction recycling. Next. When we were done with the brewery blocks, we had created places for 7,000 new jobs, 400 housing units, and was a mix of retail, housing, office, and culture. So we had looked at a number of things from a district perspective. One of those was parking. So one of the huge advantages to developing multiple sites was that we were able to build one very large, efficient parking garage underneath 3.5 of the 5 blocks, which allowed us both to share parking, so to be able to use spaces for office uses during the daytime and theater or residential uses in the evening, but again also to be able to create a floor plate that was large enough that we could get the parking cost relatively cost effective, which allowed us to put all of the parking below grade and really hide it. Next. Here are some images of the brewery blocks today. The streetcar, which runs on either side of the blocks, is a really important component to being able to provide really easy public and convenient public transportation. We also have retail uses on all of the ground floors, and we're very thoughtful about making sure that the retail space would be successful so that we could activate the ground floor and the pedestrian experience for the project. So for example, our entrances for the buildings that are essentially office buildings are mid-block so that we preserved the corners for retail space. And we also worked with our retailers and allowed our retailers to kind of customize their storefronts so that there'd be an interesting experience for the pedestrian at the street level. Next. I'm going to speak a little more about a couple of the blocks and projects that are part of the Brewery Blocks that incorporated historic renovation. We did preserve a couple of buildings that were on the site, and we did it because we were very interested in knitting the project in to the existing neighborhood and making it feel more like it had always been there rather than you know, something that would feel to people like it had been imposed on the neighborhood and plopped down. So there was a historic 1891 armory. We went through a lot of iterations of what we would do with this very, very unique building. In the end, it became the home for Portland Center Stage, which is a local theater company, and took a, you know, very complex and innovative financing structure to make it feasible, which included historic tax credits and new market tax credit and a fundraising campaign, as well as support from the city. It was the first performing arts center and the first historic renovation to achieve a LEED Platinum certification. It's got a 500-seat main stage theater as well as a 200-seat black box theater. In addition to providing, obviously, the theater amenity, it also has some really wonderful community and gathering space. It's actually used by the community for all kinds of events, from holiday parties to, you know, even weddings. It's really serves as a kind of community center. Next. Some of the sustainability features that allowed us to achieve the LEED Platinum certification included the displacement ventilation that we used, as well as chilled beams for cooling, and that chilled water is provided by a central plant which provides chilled water to all 5 of the blocks. We're harvesting rainwater to use for non-potable uses. And we did create some new skylights so that the offices, which were in the interior and which did want to have some natural light, would be good workspaces. Obviously, in the theaters themselves, you're trying to get rid of the light, but for the places where people were working, we wanted to bring natural light in. Next. The other building that we preserved was on Block 2. It's the brew house and cellar building, so it's actually where the brewmaster worked. We salvaged key historic elements. The smokestack in particular, while extremely challenging to salvage in terms of what we had to do structurally and seismically, was really had been kind of an iconic feature of the blocks and of the old brewery, so we felt like it was important to preserve. And we also kept the equipment and former tanks that we were able to salvage. Next. So another thing that we looked at holistically was the streetscape. So we worked to create a new standard of streetscape design, including benches and the width of the sidewalks and seating areas. The idea being we wanted to create a place where people would, you know, come to shop, but would also just come to hang out and would feel comfortable as, you know, belonging to the street. So that was another really important element, again, of that idea around placemaking. So retaining some of the history, looking at what the streets looked like, looking at the design of the first 30 feet, and really trying to create a place. Next. So we finished the last of the 5 blocks for the Brewery Blocks in 2008. We did achieve, we think, our goals of livability, community, connectivity, and sustainability. We had all buildings LEED certified, 4 gold, 1 platinum, 1 silver. We did achieve and exceed our energy efficiency and water efficiency goals, and we achieved our recycling goals of construction waste. And this, you know, looking back and really trying to measure how we did as compared to goals that we've set up front is something I would say we're more and more focused on in the company. We do still use LEED as a good third-party verification and measure and a guide for us, but we are more and more interested in really being able to come back and measure the energy we're saving, the water we're saving, etc. Next. And the way that we do that is via measuring energy savings and then trying to turn it into measures that make sense to people. So rather than telling them how many kilowatt hours we've saved, which doesn't mean a lot to some people, we talk about how much energy we've saved in terms of how many homes we could power and how many, the equivalent carbon dioxide reduction, how many cars that would be taking off the road, and for water savings, how many showers that's equivalent to. Next. And we summarize all of that in sort of a report card for our projects that focuses on people, planet, and profit. So we look at the environmental performance, the performance from a people and community perspective, so what's available in the neighborhood that helps people to both do the things they need to do and do the things that people enjoy doing. And then we also look at the economic benefit via construction jobs. Next, and post-construction jobs. So just as a summary of the things that we were able to accomplish, again, so many of them because we were looking at multiple blocks and looking at developing and planning them together versus on a block-by-block basis, we were able to use a central plant for chilled water. We also had energy strategies in each building that helped to achieve our energy efficiency goals. The buildings, almost all of them have eco roofs. Most of them reuse rainwater to flush toilets. The streetscape improvements were carefully thought through and also consistent throughout the blocks. We were able to build that large underground parking garage. We were able to make options for streetcar. You know, we provided a lot of bike parking and convenience for using bikes, and we were able to centralize stormwater treatment as well. And I am going to now turn it over to Beth, who is going to talk about the planning process for the Southwest Ecodistrict.
Thank you, Jill. And while Otto's getting that up, Otto and I are going to tag team this segment of the presentation. I'm going to provide you a little bit of overview and context to the project, talk about some of our urban design strategies, and Otto's going to be focusing on our environmental strategies and what we were able to achieve. So the EcoDistrict is essentially a 20-year roadmap on how we can meet several goals, how particularly the federal government could use its federal assets more efficiently, use our land more efficiently, as well as natural resources, but also how we could contribute both to the economic and environmental health of the city. And as Otto mentioned earlier, we were doing this looking beyond building by building and actually looking at it multiple blocks. So next. And our goal here was to really integrate land use, transportation, environmental planning with high-performing landscapes, buildings, and infrastructure. So just to give you a little bit of an orientation, the area we're talking about is located just south of the National Mall and just west of the U.S. Capitol, and actually just southeast of the Washington Monument. And if you were in this area today, you would never even know you were in the nation's capital or you were that close to some of these important civic institutions and the National Mall. Next. So our planning was grounded really in 3 federal policies that came out starting in 2008 under President Obama. And one was Executive Order 13514, which really looked at how the federal government could be a leader in environmental, energy, and economic performance. This was really a transformative shift in policy, and it was really pushing the federal government to really change how we operate, how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and set important targets for energy, water, and waste reduction. There were two other policies that were also occurring about the same time, and that was with all of our budget constraints, how could the federal government use its assets more efficiently? So essentially, how could we shrink our footprint? How could we get more people in less space more efficiently and effectively? And then also, what could we do to dispose of our underused land? And so just literally, kind of by the stroke of luck, we were working on some redevelopment plans for the area that we're going to be talking about. But of course, in order to do this and to do it successfully, we knew that we needed to bring in many, many stakeholders. So being the federal government, our constituency is a little bit different than a community neighborhood. But we formed a stakeholder group of 17 local and environmental agencies, 17 local and federal agencies that had something at stake within this area. But that being said, we also work closely with private property owners, both developers and citizens that lived nearby. And so that really made up our community. But we work very closely with them throughout this process. Next. So to give you a little orientation about the area itself, the area you see there in red is about 110 acres. It makes up what typically would be about 15 blocks, city blocks, but as you can see by the development pattern, there's really only about 7 or 8 blocks there. About 60% of this land is in federal ownership, and 20% is actually infrastructure, highways, railroads, and streets. And then there's about 20% privately owned. About 10 million square feet are here. There is pretty much all office. There's one hotel, no residential, and all of the retail is buried beneath, really beneath a plaza near the hotel. So you can only imagine that the expansive, unwalkable kind of character, which you can see at the bottom of the slide, it kind of gives you a sense of the character of this area. And then it also shows how the rail literally slices right through our project area. And the rail actually carries both hazardous materials as well as commuter rail. Next. But this area has a very long planning history. I should have mentioned the street that we were looking at the bottom of the slide, at the previous slide. There was a street that looked towards a building, and that was the Department of Energy. And that is the same location where you see on the slide now, that yellow line. And this area at one time, it's one of the oldest working neighborhoods in the District of Columbia. It was near the river, so it was actually a port facility near the Capitol. It had a very fine-grained, very walkable, very mixed-use pattern at one time. But because of the sanitary conditions over time, from the early 1800s into the early 1900s, it really became sort of an embarrassment to the Capitol because of the poor conditions, and it was really very much a health hazard, you know, to the area and to the river. So this really began the era that we all know as urban renewal. There were over 400 acres cleared. About 28,000 people were displaced. Something that we're not very proud of today. And it really essentially became one of the largest urban renewal projects in the country. Next. So as a result, this is the character that we see today. In addition to the single uses that I just described, we displaced, you know, that fine-grained mixed-use fabric with these really large super block mid-century modern buildings, really that have no relationship between building and the ground plane. In their day, they were quite the feat, but as time has worn on, it's really shown that this really doesn't make for a very livable place. There are a number of parks in the area. Some of the parks are actually quite nice. The the fountain you see in the bottom left hand of the screen is a Dan Kiley project that it's very difficult to get to, and it's not a good experience to get there. Next. So this next slide shows you a kind of an aerial view. It's a model that we did looking at the EcoDistrict. You see the Department of Energy in the forefront that sits about on 20 acres. You can see the inefficient use of land. Behind that, going to the top of the screen, that's where the rail cuts through. And then you can see the highway that cuts through towards the bottom. And then there's a lot of ramps. When this area was developed, and what you don't see here, but there's actually 3 layers of things going on underground. So there's a layer of parking, there's the rail line layer, there's parking and roads, and then there's decked roads and decked parks that really make this area really impenetrable. It's very difficult to walk from one place to another. And again, you can see where it sits in relationship to the mall. And then to the top of the screen, you'll see the water body there is the Potomac River. And that is an area right now that it's under a major redevelopment. There's about a $3 billion mixed-use project going in as we speak. Next. So this is what we're trying to actually create. So what we did, and Otto's going to talk a bit more about this, but we went in and looked at how we could reuse and redevelop various areas within our study area to really reconnect the street grid, remove those infrastructure barriers such as the rail and the highway, and we did that by decking over that infrastructure, how we could integrate more of a mix of use, and really make this just a walkable, livable place. So that was really kind of the big move for sort of the urban design goal. But from the federal perspective, we were also very interested in is actually extending the idea of the National Mall out from the mall down towards the river to Banneker Park, because we are running out of places for new museums and memorials for future generations. And we're starting to see the mall become built out. So we were actually looking at how we could improve the settings of some of these potential cultural spaces. And this is going to be very important to some of the things we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But that 10th Street Southwest is an important corridor that kind of helps extend the mall out into the city. Next. So to get to this vision, we actually looked at two types of strategies. We had an urban design or a neighborhood framework, kind of an urban design strategy, but also our environmental framework. And actually go ahead and go to the next slide. So the neighborhood framework really looked at the mix of land use, how we would actually locate where our retail nodes would be, where our cultural nodes would be, how we would connect the open space system, and of course integrating that in with how would we reconnect the street network and really make it much more mobile and walkable. And we went beyond looking not only how you physically could reconnect that street network, but also what would be the character of those streets. How would we start to create a sense of place? How would we start placemaking here so that we could take this area, break it up, and really make it not only integrated into the surrounding neighborhoods and the surrounding community, but give it its own sense of place as well. One thing I won't go too much into today, it would actually be enough for another presentation, is the transportation opportunities here. There's 4 metro lines that come in, commuter rail from Virginia and Maryland, both come in at a hub here, as well as the regional eastern seaboard. We have Amtrak that comes through this location. So one of our big objectives is how we could increase the efficiency of using this as a transportation hub, particularly as our main station, Union Station, for those of you that may be familiar with DC, is really becoming more important as an eastern seaboard hub. So we're really needing to expand our transportation capacity, and we really see this area as being an opportunity to do that. Next. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Otto, who's going to talk about some of our environmental strategies, and then I'll pick it back up to talk about some of the more of the placemaking and the urban design character that we were able to achieve with this project. Otto?
Thank you, Beth. As Beth mentioned, the plan was guided by the executive order, which was really to strive for the goal of making the district net zero energy as measured in carbon, and there were also water targets. So starting off with the energy, what was really evident at the beginning, there had to be multiple approaches. We were fortunate that there was a central energy plant in the district which feeds power to all the federal properties and some of the District of Columbia properties. One of the challenges will be that to turn this, to be able to share energy when residential properties start to occur to create a mixed-use neighborhood, it will require an act of Congress to allow the federal plant to serve all the properties. When we looked at the district scale, the strategies included the creation of microgrids, where there was development on the ground to look at ground source heat. We looked at opportunities for sewer mining and also for photovoltaic energy. As the approach looked at the district, it looked at the block and looked at the building scales. And there was a very high level conceptual modeling done for this project, and I will give credit also to the other members of our team. We had ARIP, which was doing the energy modeling, and we also had HRNA economic advisors, because we were not only looking at the environmental sustainability but the economic sustainability as part of the success of the district. So in looking at currently, it's mostly carbon-laden electricity. We were able to reduce carbon emissions by 51%. We had about 30% renewables. You know, as a high-density neighborhood, we could get about 7% out of photovoltaics, and I think that was one of the big lessons is in an urban area, you can't rely on photovoltaics. We did also get about 2% from sewer mining, which was to really absorb the heat off of the storm and sewer going out of the district, and you use it similar to geothermal process. We were able to reduce the current usage of energy for coming from, which is currently all office, to the mix of uses significantly, and the conversion of about 70% to natural gas. Now, this is a 30-year plan, and the hope is that in the next 30 years, with opportunities for more other energy sources, we can achieve the net zero as measured in carbon. Stormwater was on the site itself right now is 92 million gallons of water falls, and the charge was, we started with a 60% reduction of municipal potable water use, and actually the steering committee we had suggested let's aim for 70%. Currently, because it's office, the water usage is lower than if it was a mixed-use neighborhood, about 22 gallons per square foot of overall development, and as part of the target, we were looking at going down to 6 gallons per square foot in a mixed-use neighborhood, which is a significant challenge. In order to do this, we, working with the steering committee, which included the EPA, and it was decided we could collect all that water. Now, we thought 92 million gallons of water would be more than enough, but in reality, we needed to look at other strategies for also reuse and recycling of water. We looked at the district scale, and in this case, we were able to take advantage of the infrastructure that was built, as you see on the lower diagram, which included the 2 levels of streets, and there was area to build cisterns to collect all the rainwater and treat the water. And then also at the block scale, we looked at how, as the project would be developed in phases, there was opportunities to treat the stormwater and collect the stormwater, and then also how to collect and treat the wastewater. When originally we were looking at the reduction of potable water use, as part of our modeling, this diagram illustrates the process that we developed. And with collection of water, reuse of the stormwater, filter and disinfection. We actually found that with the current regulatory opportunities in the district, we could actually achieve 100% water reuse. The stormwater study in the district, currently the District of Columbia has created a stormwater credit system, and when we looked at the opportunities for doing the infrastructure, we modeled it and both the costs, and in the district, if you collect more than a certain amount, you can start to sell it on a credit system. And we were able to prove that with all the improvements and also by collecting all the water on the site, we could use the credit system to help to pay for the investment for a better payback. The process of sustainability also, in terms of multiple strategies, also looked at how buildings might be, the approach towards buildings. Currently, all the light gray buildings are the federal buildings in the site. We identified multiple strategies. Some buildings could be lightly rehabbed in order to meet some of the goals, and they would be buildings that needed to be reused. Some buildings could be a full rehab, which in the district means replacing all the sorry, I seem to be having trouble.
Otto, are both of your screens blank?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think my computer just died.
Okay. Well, I have a copy of it, so let me pull it up for you real quick, and
okay,
we can go from there.
Okay. Sorry about that. Is it up?
I'm pulling it up right now. It's downloading.
Okay.
Sorry, folks.
You could do a commercial break.
I know. Well, I can answer one question for you. Yes, the presentation will be available. I'm getting some questions about that.
Yeah.
It will be available as a PDF and on ohioplanning.org/planning webcast and on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast on YouTube.
And while we're waiting for that to come up,
yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say with the EcoDistrict, if you would like to learn more, you can go to NTPC's website, and we have the EcoDistrict plan along with a stormwater study that ZGF did for us, and as well as a concept design for the 10th Street Southwest corridor that we're going to talk a little bit more about. So there is some technical information available on our website at ntpc.gov.
Okay, I'm loading it up now. Here we go.
Okay,
I guess you don't know what slide you're on. I guess that was a silly question to ask. Duh.
But if Beth, do you want to take over on the last two slides?
Yeah, I'll start to talk. So we are on slide 42, I think.
Oh, good. Okay. Let's see.
And so, yeah, what Otto was finishing up on was that we used a combination of strategies. We really looked at how each of the buildings in our eco-district were performing, both from an energy perspective as well as water. And based upon that, started to make some decisions on how we would reuse or redevelop those buildings to help achieve our goals. And well, actually, my slides are pretty visual here, so the good news is that, and I will, as we're getting this geared up, you know, Otto said this is a 20 to 30-year plan, and when we did this plan, we knew it was pretty darn ambitious, and it was really starting to think very differently than we traditionally think and how we think about redevelopment. But I'm very pleased to say that there are 3 major projects going on right now. Even before we finished the plan, there was momentum starting to happen in trying to move some of these ideas forward. The General Services Administration is looking to actually dispose of 2 of their federal headquarters or federal buildings in this area. And what that means is that they will take those employees that are in those facilities. Well, actually, one building is already empty, but one is pretty darn full. And they're consolidating space in other buildings in the district and basically moving where we had a usability rate of about 300 square feet per person, you know, looking at common areas and everything else within a building. That's being reduced down to, you know, sometimes less than 200 square feet. So we're really looking at how we can get more people in less space and use our space much more efficiently. So those GSA is looking to go out for an RFP for a developer very soon. So we expect that some of this mixed use goals that we have can start to occur once that happens. We also have what we call the Spy Museum, which is located north of the National Mall. It's a private cultural facility. They're actually looking to relocate within the plaza area. Are you able to get to? Oh, okay. Now, I'm sorry. I thought you were still trying to get here. I know where we are now. Anyway, there's a plaza area where this hotel is located, where you can see that white spot just off 10th Street. But there's a major museum looking to go there now. That's really going to be a catalyst for redevelopment. Next. I'm going to run through these next series of slides pretty quickly. This is the existing condition of where the rail runs through. There's one single platform, pedestrian loading. There's 3 tracks. We're actually looking to increase this to 4. And in some areas of the eco-district, we're actually going to be decking this rail. But in the building that you see in the foreground is the Department of Energy. We are proposing to redevelop that building. And once that comes down, next, you'll see it will really connect this part of the district to the National Mall, and you'll get a sense that you actually are in the nation's capital. And we're looking at how we can incorporate solar arrays and do different strategies to not only generate some energy, but also make it really feel like you're in an eco-district. Next. This is the Department of Energy looking down 10th Street. Next. And then this is actually, once we actually finished the eco-district plan, we did some additional work on this 10th Street corridor that we mentioned earlier. And this was very much an effort to dive deeper into the planning and design process to really look at how we could integrate placemaking with sustainability. And this is a pretty desolate strip of area now, and we looked at how we could create an episodic experience and different nodes along this street to really make it a green street and a strong connection between the National Mall and Banneker Park, and then down to the waterfront. Next. This starts to give you a sense of kind of the varied spaces. You'll see the existing condition in the bottom left. What's interesting here is this street actually includes some on-grade terra firma areas, but it also encompasses 3 bridges. So the character changes based upon, you know, the infrastructure conditions that we have to work with. But again, this is really about looking at how we can incorporate different kinds of water features that will recycle the water, clean the water, store the water, put it back into the cisterns that Otto talked about, and to reuse that water within our district. Next. This is actually getting over one of the bridge structures. This is the plaza area, and this is actually one area right now that may even get designed before we even get the whole street designed. We've got a lot of momentum to actually start doing some of this work. But again, just a different character based upon the conditions in which we have to work. Next. This is Banneker Park looking up from near the waterfront. Next. This is a Dan Kiley landscape, and this is very important to us because this is where we want to actually expand our cultural development out to this location and really bring the mall down to the waterfront. And this would actually become sort of a new entryway, a southern entryway to the National Mall. Next. This is actually looking up from the waterfront. This is right now the only way to get up and down from this hill is this little path that you see in the distance. We call it the goat path. And actually, ZGF and Otto and his team are working right now with the developer of the waterfront and the National Park Service, next, to build an interim connection that will be in place until such time this Banneker Park area develops into more of a cultural hub, I guess you could say. Next. So to sum it up, what Otto talked about some of what we were able to achieve from the environmental perspective. So we were able to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 51%, our potable water use by 70%, our energy reduction by 62%. But we were also able, by using our land more efficiently and selectively redeveloping certain areas, able to increase our square footage by 4 million square feet, which would allow us to gain that mixed use community that we're looking for. And we were able to achieve about 2 million square feet of residential that would bring in about 1,200 residents, and as well as tourist accommodations for hotel rooms, 600 hotel rooms. We looked at some retail nodes, and we can also achieve about 1 million square feet of cultural use in addition to some private office use. Next. And during this process, we worked with HRNA, as Otto mentioned, to look at what the cost benefits were. And I would just say, from a planning perspective, we did our plan, and we did a very high-level cost-benefit analysis to show that we thought that the benefits would outweigh the investment. And with that, we were able to get enough momentum, enough interest from our stakeholders to give us the room to actually do a much deeper dive into the cost-benefit analysis to look at, like, who really pays, who benefits, what it would cost each of the stakeholders, whether they be private developers, the city, or the federal government. And I think this was a really important step in showing the validity of this concept and these ideas, and what really has helped to move it towards implementation. And I think with that, I'll say that one of the things that's also been extremely helpful is joining the Target Cities program. We were selected as one of the EcoDistrict organization's target cities, and Adam and his team are providing us with a lot of technical assistance of how do we move these plans towards implementation. And the biggest difference here is that rather than belonging to the central utility system, the utility provider for the region, or the water provider for the region, is how do we go in and really look at governing our energy and water at a much different scale, a smaller scale. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Beth. I'll just wait for that slide to come up. Good afternoon, everyone. I just would like to start by picking up on a couple of comments that that both Jill and Otto had touched on in their presentations. EcoDistricts is a non-profit. We're based out of Portland, Oregon, and our history is originally based on being a city-owned non-profit set up by the former mayor of Portland, Sam Adams. And so Portland was our home, and our original time as the Portland Sustainability Institute was as a non-profit serving the city and working with city agencies and private sector and non-profits within the city of Portland. However, in 2013 we relaunched a new non-profit just called EcoDistricts, and we're now more North American serving and beyond as well. So we were very much inspired, and I suppose you could describe the original code for EcoDistricts was really born out of the Brewery Blocks and the Pearl District, which both Jill and Otto talked about. And as Beth has just mentioned, our current pilot program called Target Cities is sort of our next generation of continuing to evolve the work and the big idea that we sort of created back in Portland in 2009, 2010. Next. If I go back to the early days for us as the Portland Sustainability Institute, we got to get our hands dirty on projects. We got to do a lot of research to try and identify and study why projects fail. And therefore, the job was to try and avoid doing that. So we spent a lot of time understanding why we are continually confronted with barriers and challenges. A lot of the time, urban regeneration is very complex work. It involves a whole range of stakeholders that are often not aligned. There's a lot of entrenched mindsets and competing forces, and I think at times you just feel that the world's working against you, and there's disincentives everywhere. And so we really unpacked that and studied that, and we decided that that was going to be our focus in life, which is to try and help project teams navigate the complexity of these district scale integrated projects, so that we could make sure that we get closer and we can indeed accelerate implementation. Next. Along the way, we've learned many things. We've identified a theory of change that we like to work with, and that really speaks to the idea of promoting a new model of urban regeneration. We think we've got a model that can help us get to the place we want to in terms of implementation in an accelerated manner, and deeply rooted in that new model is this idea of authentic collaboration and indeed, honouring and respecting the community's collective wisdom. So we sort of prescribe to that theory of change that shapes a lot of our work, and I wanted to share a little bit with you today. Next slide. The first 3 years of our life in Portland was working with 5 pilot projects across the city. They were very diverse in typology, shape and size. Their respective interests and issues were very complex and diverse, and we learned a lot from those original 5 Portland pilot projects. But as Beth has just alluded to, we've broadened our geographic reach, of course, and currently the first year through a 2-year pilot program with 10 projects across 8 cities in North America. You can see them there on the map. So what I'm going to talk to you today about, and in particular the EcoDistricts protocol, we're using these sort of real-time, real-life projects to help evolve that code that we originally wrote back in Portland in 2010 and sort of evolve that to be more of a national and international standard. And having 10 awesome projects to work with, to share, to learn is the best way to go about that. Next slide. So I'm sort of referring to this idea of this code that we wrote. What it actually was is it was a 14-page PDF document that we released in 2010, and it was sort of in some way our manifesto. It was a summary of the big idea. We were a very small non-profit organisation back then. We were only 2 people, and so we relied on Portland State University, local firms, the City of Portland, the Portland Development Commission, to sort of get our head around sort of this new model that we think that we can aspire to achieve. And Portland's not a big city, but it's very much punched above its weight in terms of its ability to form public-private partnerships and get a lot of implementation happening, particularly in a city that doesn't have a lot of money. And so that spirit of public-private partnership, being entrepreneurial, being scrappy, coming together in collaborative environments to get stuff done, we summarised what we thought that meant and how you go about that. And that was originally documented in this EcoDistricts framework. Fast forward to 2013, when we decided to sort of broaden our horizon beyond just the City of Portland. We knew that we needed to sort of refresh and update that code, that framework. And so today what we have is the EcoDistricts protocol, which has been evolving for about the last 2 years. And the way we describe it is that it's a set of commitments that we believe the marketplace needs to embrace if we want to build just, sustainable, resilient cities and neighbourhoods for all. And it's those commitments that we've crafted and we've defined that we believe help project teams, like the Southwest Ecodistrict, to help create the conditions for implementation. This is not a new model of planning necessarily. It's not about producing plans and documents. As Otto said, that is a significant part of it, but then it's crafting and curating the governance and leadership and the commitment arrangements that we need to actually move to a place of implementation. Next slide. So these commitments contained within the protocol, there's 3 of them. We sort of loosely describe them as the imperatives, the outcomes, and then the process. The EcoDistricts imperatives, there's 3 of them. They're our starting point. These are 3 critical issues that we believe we need to move the needle on. There's a lot of important issues out there, but equity, climate protection, and resilience is our starting point. We have then these 6 priority areas. That's our lens through which we define what a sustainable district and neighbourhood is. You'll see them in a moment. They're a good, classic, wholesome, holistic list of technical issues and outcomes that we want to achieve. You've seen the targets, you've seen the projections and the goals that have been set for Southwest. That's what our priority areas do. They provide a scope and a lens through setting those goals and targets and objectives. And then the final commitment is the 4-phase implementation model. This is the real engine room of the EcoDistricts protocol. This is the steps we need to take. This is the process we need to follow. And process isn't sexy. Process is hard to sell to people because it's process. But what we're essentially doing in the protocol is trying to get project teams and organisations to codify, a new process, a new model that's going to get us closer to implementing all these great ideas that we aspire to achieve. Next slide. So the protocol is currently in version 0. It's being tested and refined with the target cities pilot projects. That's it there on the left-hand side of the slide. We'll be releasing that as a version 1 in spring next year. We're currently just starting an intense online tool development process. The protocol is the mothership document, and then you can see sort of an ecosystem of its case studies and guides that we're producing. Next slide. for those that are familiar with LEED, the LEED rating tool, maybe LEED ND, you've no doubt seen and played with. You've probably got a copy on your desk at work. We've sort of taken the idea of sort of getting a big book and breaking it apart. Generally, nothing's over 40 pages that we produce, so that we know that people are reading it. And we've sort of decentralized a whole range of different issues and processes so that people can sort of pick and choose what they really need support with. And you can see there a selection of the toolkits and guides that we have. Next slide. We released late last year, thanks to some support from the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, an EcoDistrict policy toolkit. So this is sort of written by municipalities for municipalities. Helps them create a culture and a framework to be able to interact with private sector on district scale projects, which is often a challenge for some municipalities that are pretty much used to sort of being guided by building code or other regulatory mechanisms to help grow their cities. So these are examples of the type of support and tools that we've created to help accelerate the big ideas that are in the protocol. Next slide. The other thing that we've done with our Target Cities project, having the benefit of 10 project teams scattered across North America, is that we've been able to create a strong peer-to-peer learning network. These teams are sort of sharing together their, they're leaning on each other's shoulders, they're sharing their challenges, but also their successes, and we continue to sort of find a lot of cross-fertilization, sharing of RFP templates, very practical things like that, but also looking to sort of hunt as a pack together to raise funding to really progress some key ideas, particularly around issues like development without displacement and district energy, which continue to be challenges in the marketplace for us. Next slide. So when we launch the protocol as a version 1 next spring, it actually is part of a broader portal that will be switched on. Whilst there's a lot of tools and frameworks in the marketplace, most of them are quantitative-based rating tools. We're developing the protocol because we couldn't find a process-based tool in the marketplace, so we're sort of finally doing that hard work. But we also got a clear indication across city government, across private sector, that there's a whole lot more that they would love to get their hands on, and we've subsequently sort of designed this broader marketplace that the industry can go to access resources and learn. You can indeed commit and download the protocol, you can access it, you can register your commitment to embrace it and seek third-party verification. We'll have an award scheme. And so we're sort of building this out over time. We'll be doing it in partnership with folks like APA and CNU and others. So that's going to be a more longer term project, but it will be the place in which people can go to sort of interact with the protocol and the supporting infrastructure around it. Next slide. I just want to quickly take you through these 3 commitments in the protocol briefly. There's the 3 imperatives. I'm not going to speak to these really any more than what I have. You'll be able to sort of get a copy of this, and you can always contact me. But they're our real core elements to the protocol. Next slide. What I will say is that the 3 imperatives have been weaved throughout the other 2 commitments. So that second commitment, as I mentioned, is this sustainability lens, the outcomes that we define for our projects. They're our priority areas. Good, classic list that wouldn't be new to any of you. Next slide. But this third and final commitment is the real code that I've been talking about. This 4-phase implementation methodology. Starts with a formation phase. Phase 2 is classic sort of master planning and target setting, identifying the strategies and investments that you want to implement. Phase 3 is implementation, detailed planning, design, financing, funding, construction, implementation of initiatives or programs. And phase 4 is this idea of a closing the loop cycle, getting our districts and neighbourhoods to report back on their performance against those original targets that they set. And this is a phase that we're neck deep in at the moment, scoping out. It's a challenge because globally there is very little, if any, evidence of district and neighbourhood scale performance monitoring, which isn't helping us at the moment. We don't have a lot to go on. We do it very well for building scale projects, individual buildings, and also getting up to a citywide scale. We definitely have got some good case studies there, but at that district and neighbourhood scale, we're pretty much absent globally. We can sort of count them on one hand, really good case studies where there's governance in place, where the city and the community and private sector have a framework to continually monitor how the district and neighbourhood is evolving. So that's an important phase, and it's one that we're building out at the moment. Next slide. Just very quickly, we've designed an interactive dashboard that project teams can use to track their progress of the 3 commitments. It's self-populating, it's interactive, and indeed this is where there's embedded trigger points to allow you to seek third-party verification. I'll keep going given time. The next slide shows just an example of within phase 2, the ecosystem of templates that we've created for project teams to work through. You need to remember that our audience is quite broad. Next slide, thanks. Our audience is very broad. It can be redevelopment authorities, planning directors, consulting firms, but also non-profits and neighbourhood-based organisations. So practical guidance has always been at the heart of our work. Let me just let's fast forward through these next handful of slides. They're just sort of a couple of examples of our target cities projects. So we have, if we can move through them, we have Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. Next slide. Here's some of the templates that we use in the workshops to help them go through the commitments in the protocol. Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. If we just keep going, then we've got an amazing project in Ottawa, Ontario, and also the city of Gatineau in Quebec, Austin, Texas, the Seahome Power, the Seahome Ecodistrict brownfield redevelopment site. And also put on, next slide, the Capitol Hill Ecodistrict up in Seattle, which was one of our early sort of students and that we learnt a lot from, in fact, when the Pearl District was happening as well. So the Pacific Northwest has always been a nice little source of inspiration for us, and there's great work going on there. Next slide. And indeed, they've shown some great leadership, particularly at a city level. They passed a resolution earlier this year that the EcoDistrict up there is now recognised as a formal sort of framework and agent for advancing the city's sustainability goals. So we're seeing some great, just over the last 2 years, some great evolution and actual implementation and action happening in a policy environment for EcoDistricts. So next slide, that's me done. So I'll stop talking there, and hopefully we'll have some questions.
Okay, great. Let's see, we have about 10 minutes and about a million questions. So let's see what we can do, huh? Thanks to everyone. I guess we'll kind of start up at the top and try to work our way down. There's definitely some groupings of questions, so I'll try to get to those big groups. And sorry to the folks who don't get their question answered. Jill, you're up first. The brew house cellar building was completed in 2002. While being on the leading edge of green practices, would the financing conditions be different today? If so, how would they be different, and would you finance it the same way? Uh-oh. Jill, are you there?
Actually, her phone looks not green.
Hold on, let me see here. Okay, I don't know what happened to Jill. Okay. Oh, there she is. Jill, are you there?
Sorry, I am.
Okay.
I was switching from speaker to hands the phone and hung up. So
Oh, okay.
Anyway, so the question was, would for Block 2, the historic brew house and the new office building that it's connected to, would the financing be different today?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Let's see. So the way we financed Block 2 at the time, it's an institutional investor who owned, who invested and owned the project from the beginning. I would say the one thing that might be different today, which isn't really specific to that project, but more general for just office, is it's more challenging than it was at that time to finance speculative office. So if you don't have office space pre-leased, that doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just more challenging. But I don't think there's anything specific to that project that would make it hugely different in terms of how you finance it today.
Okay, thank you. Next question. There's a chunk of questions regarding the brewery blocks. The first question is a two-parter. One, what is displacement ventilation? So let's start there.
So underfloor air, so rather than having the air come from the ceiling and trying to force it down, it's below the floor so that it's easier to get the hot air to rise and to cool a space. So in theaters, as you know, they go from being completely empty to completely filled with people, and so the ability to cool them quickly to address the number of people that you have all at once is important, and it's a very energy efficient way to do it.
Thank you. And also regarding the brewery blocks, how affordable was the new housing?
So there were, one building was apartments, one was condominiums. They were both market rate projects. The apartments did have an affordability component to them where 20% of the units were below market rent, not a truly kind of, when people think of affordable or subsidized housing, not a rent at 60% area median income, but more around 80% area median, but below market. Otherwise, all of the units and all the condominiums were market rate.
Great. Let's see, more brewery blocks. Could you, and I'm not sure who spoke about this. This might have been, I don't remember at which point who mentioned this, but whoever it was, could they speak further on the benefits of having benches face the buildings in the brewery blocks?
I think I mentioned it.
Okay.
This is Jill.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's so that they're looking at the activity on the sidewalks rather than looking at the cars, in the street. And so it keeps the focus and the energy on the sidewalks and the entries to the retail and to the buildings.
Okay, great. I'm just scanning down to see if there's any more. Wait, did I see another one? Nope, I think we're good. I think that might have been it for those. Okay. I think Elizabeth, thank you. Elizabeth, I think you're up. Unlike the rest of the country, in DC, the U.S. Congress has special oversight planning authority. Did Congress help, hinder, interfere with the Southwest Ecodistrict?
Oh, good question. Yeah, they did not interfere. We really did this as an independent study, and with the intent to show both the executive and legislative branch what we can do, through an eco-district. I will say since our plan's been done, it has garnered some attention from Congress, and there has been some attention put on to looking at how can it be implemented, particularly with our local, even though DC, as most of you may or may not know, we don't have representation in Congress, but we do have a House of Representatives that has a seat there, non-voting member, and she's been very interested in seeing what we can do to try to move this towards implementation. And the Congress has also, as well as the Office of Management and Budget through the legislative branch, has given the General Services, the administration, the go-ahead to start looking at how they can reposition their properties, which will in effect allow us to implement this project over time.
Okay, somewhat related, and Otto, jump in too. How about the roles, excuse me, of the local government? So not so much Congress, but local planning office, anything like that. How did they play a role in this?
Otto, why don't you answer that?
Okay, well, the district government was a partner in the study. They were also doing independent study for the Maryland Avenue corridor. The interesting thing is that, looking at, and this is with the study, the financial aspects, there was the analysis was, okay, how would the federal government benefit? How might private developers benefit? How might the employees themselves benefit? And then also, what is the role of the district? And districts, because they would be maintaining all the right-of-way, they would have significant more requirements with all the additional new streets, more of a responsibility. But the benefit was also that with some of the federal property being turned over to the private sector, it would also create additional tax base. So that's the broad overview, but the district government was a full partner, and in fact actually commissioned the initial market studies to identify that at least as a base case, at least 1,000 to 1,500 housing units needed to go into the neighborhood to both create a vital neighborhood and to start to meet some of the goals for creating a richer district of Columbia. Richer as in terms of experience and more mixed population in the district.
Okay, great, thank you. Looks like we only have time for one more question. This one's for Adam. How does the EcoDistricts model and protocol address the potential for sustainable revitalization and placemaking to lead to gentrification and displacement of existing, possibly lower income residents, i.e. development without displacement?
That's a great question, and as you saw from the slides, one that's dear to our heart. The equity imperative speaks to those issues. We've been unpacking the concept of development without displacement, trying to identify core strategies that are successful both at a project level but also the policy-related environment that we need to encourage development that doesn't displace. Those elements that we've found, that we've researched, we've had experts working with us, they've been weaved into the four-phase methodology. So it starts with who you invite to the table, who you engage with, who's part of your leadership and governance. And then, of course, that phase 2 is critical, which identifies the particular types of strategies and investments that you make. So we use the four-phase process methodology to embed those attributes that we've been unpacking from those key imperatives. And happy to, it's a long one, we could talk for a long time, so happy to follow up with anyone that wants to sort of share, and indeed I'd love to hear from others if they have some great examples. We're continually learning ourselves.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Otto, Elizabeth, Jill, Adam, Margaret. I know you're still hanging around back there. Thanks to all of you for joining us today, and for everyone for hanging in for our few glitches that we had. And Adam, what is it? Must be like 3 or 4 in the morning where you are right now. So thanks for hanging in there with us. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Again, you can view this webcast on our YouTube channel. Just search Planning Webcast Series. And also you can get the PDF of this on our website, ohioplanning.org/planningwebcast. And also, if you download the PDF version, all of the contact information will be at the end slide. This is an older version that I pulled up here today. So again, thanks everyone, and we will talk to you next time. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.